Here we are, ladies and gentlemen, with Ubi Tennis, with Mats Wilander, a famous great champion. Only he has been #1 in the world only for 20 weeks. It's not too much, but could have been better. But it's we cannot complain. You cannot complain. Steve Flink is an Hall of Famer since he was born. So which means about 8 years ago, and. Well, we are here. I want to introduce you very quickly, Mats, even if you don't need presentation, because you won only 33 tournaments. 7 of them were slams, 7 doubles.
Ubaldo, let me interrupt just for a second. Mats, if he says to you right now that you should have won more tournaments, I'm here to say unfair. Unfair. Ubaldo will often say that to our distinguished guests. They could have won more, and he means it as a compliment, but I think you did well enough with 33 career titles.
Well enough. So, come on. Anyway, Mats, thanks a lot for being with us. We know that you are in Idaho. I know nothing about Idaho apart potatoes, only potatoes, I heard. And I know that you like my bresaola when I invite you to eat bresaola with Parmesan cheese and Italian olive oil and everything else. Tell us about Idaho. How are you? How is your family? I know you have 5 children, which are...
Four children.
Four children, okay. 4 children, which is little less than 3 slams, but more they keep you more busy probably.
Yeah, first of all, yes, I'm in Sun Valley, Idaho, and we live up in the Rocky Mountains. So where I'm sitting now is about 2,000 meters above sea level, so it's pretty high. We have a beautiful ski mountain called Bald Mountain in Sun Valley. We have potatoes, big baked potatoes, that's how you like them, but that's in the south of the state. So okay. I'm in the middle, central Idaho. We have beautiful public land. In fact, we have the most public land in the whole of the USA compared to private land, which is one of the reasons I live here. My kids there's 4 of them, not 5. There's 4, and they are all in their 20s, and 3 of them have finished school. I have a tennis club in Haley, Idaho, which is just 10 minutes south of where I live, called Gravity Fitness and Tennis. I have 3 indoor courts and a new gym. So today I'm going to go down and teach tennis for 4 hours. Yesterday I did 3 hours. Tomorrow I got 5 hours.
How many players?
Which with amateurs just like the 2 of you.
Okay.
Yes, people that need help from somebody like me, which I really enjoy. I have to say, I enjoy teaching tennis. I enjoy running and moving, and I don't think about my past a lot. But Bob Dylan once said in the opening line of a song called Silvio, he says, I stake my future on a hell of a past. That's exactly what I do.
Mats, how do you manage to how big are the groups that you're teaching, and what are the rules and the restrictions now?
Yeah, so the rules right now is that you can have a maximum of 4 people total on a tennis court. So that's me plus 3 more. We try to have only me pick up the tennis balls. If somebody's helping, then they get assigned a basket or a tube that you can pick up balls with, and then we clean it off afterwards. So we're trying to be as correct as possible. And I think a tennis court outdoors is obviously the safest place. We are indoors, so it's a little closer, but still, I feel like tennis is a sport that you can keep playing and practicing if you take care.
You're indoor because it's the climate is cold still, and because you talk about a mountain. I don't know if you can go and skiing on that mountain. Are you a skier or not? Because I remember yes, you were a nice hockey player, not a skier.
I played ice hockey. Every Swedish person plays ice hockey. even the girls these days, of course. But I ski alpine. I was infected by Ingemar Stenmark. I know that name is very painful to all Italians because of Gustavo.
No, I mean, like Gustavo Töni was quite often quite painful for the Swedish.
And my favorite skier was actually Piero Gross.
Okay.
In those days. But so I ski alpine, I ski cross country, but no, we have 3 indoor tennis courts. And I like the indoors here because the climate is very similar to basically the Alps in the northern of Italy. You never know, you can get summer, you can get winter at any time. In the summer, you could have snow. So I really enjoy playing indoors these days. I used to not like it.
Listen, there was a reason why you went to Idaho once. I remember you were living in Greenwich, Connecticut. Why did you move so far away from there? Because you like more the mountains, or what was the reason?
Well, the main reason that I moved to Greenwich, Connecticut, first of all, is that I got an advice from my then enemy, Ivan Lendl. He said, you should move to Greenwich because the taxes are a little bit less than in New York City. I used to live in New York City. And then I became #1 in Greenwich in 1988 because, of course, I moved there in '87. But then Ivan took back the #1 ranking. So I thought I need to move far away as possible so that I can still be the best player. We have a child that has a skin problem, and we moved to Idaho because it was much better for his health.
Oh, is he better? Is he better?
Yes, yeah. The climate is favorable to him. Yeah.
Okay. Listen, talking about young and teenagers or 20 years old people, where in recent days we have seen Sasha Zverev going to some parties where maybe he shouldn't have gone. We saw the week before Novak Djokovic, being generous as he has always been, but also a little naive as sometimes he has been, and so he didn't take probably precautions enough, as you know, for the Adria tour. What is your opinion about these situations? And
well, I mean, I know I actually interviewed Novak during the first day that they had the tour, and he was so excited to be doing it. He said he had basically tears in his eyes when he was playing and afterwards because the support was there. Of course, the Serbian government gave the okay for him to run the tour. So I think it stops there. I think that the responsibility that Novak felt he fulfilled by doing the tour. And then, of course, it's an individual decision, and you're risking your own health and you're risking everybody else's health by doing something like that. But he's not the expert. The Serbian government, I think, are the experts in that region, and somehow they misjudged the situation, and obviously we know what happened. So I feel obviously really, really bad for Novak as an individual, because I agree with you. He's trying so hard, and he does do the right thing all the time, and he is most probably naive, but at the same time, it doesn't just hurt Novak. It hurts obviously the people that got it, but it hurts the professional tennis tour. I think we're looking at the US Open without Novak Djokovic. I'm not sure if that would be called the US Open, but so I think it's a lot of bad luck, and I feel really bad.
Well,
Matt, so how do you feel about
Steve? Sorry, just one second. To go back to what you said. Correct. The Serbian government is the principal responsible, but certain situations like going in a discotheque, dancing one next to the other, that was not a government policy. I mean, that was Novak who decided that he was allowed to go there. It was, and also what happens, playing football and basketball, all contact sports, which everywhere else are more or less forbidden. And last thing, when someone says that Croatia and Serbia have small numbers, well, Croatia has a population of 4 million people, which is like some regions in Italy. And I tell you, the proportion between the people who live there in Italy and Croatia are not much different when you talk about contagious. So this is what I want to say.
Yeah, I think, you know what I think? I think Sweden very famously went to obviously social distancing, but they kept the factories and everything open, and they told the main doctor said, listen, if you are over 70 years old, if you are Steve Flink's age, then you should stay home.
Well done.
Then you should stay home. And if you're younger, then keep your social distancing. And Sweden's number were not great in the beginning. And I think that this is a situation where a lot of people are going to get infected along the way. It might take a year, it might take 5 years. I don't know when we're going to stop this disease. So maybe Serbia, in a way, most people are not going to maybe be immune to the disease, and maybe in 5 years that will serve them well. So I think I would be feeling like I'm jumping to conclusions too early, because I feel like, hey, most people are most probably going to get this disease. Some people not very harsh, and some people really bad.
Mats, just to follow up on what Yubala was saying, also to clarify, I'm 68 years old now. I haven't quite hit the big 7-0. But Mats, in terms of what happened there in Serbia, what struck me is that Yubala's making very valid points about Novak, but why was he subjected to all the criticism? The other players made up their minds. They're grown-ups. Zverev, Dimitrov, all these guys, the team, they knew what they were doing. And I don't think that Novak had to twist their arm. So were you surprised that all the flack seemed to come his way rather than against you making the comment on all the players?
Yes, very surprised. I mean, not surprised. Of course, that's going to happen. It's going to happen. Yeah. He's the famous one. He's the world number one. I think Novak is a very intelligent individual, and he'll figure out that, listen, personally, it's not my fault. You guys came or whatever. So, yeah, it's unfair. That's the way it is. It's unfair. The world is unfair. He's world number one. He might end up being the greatest player of all time. And to some players, that might seem unfair. So I think that, yeah, it's a critical position that he has in the professional game of tennis, not just as a player, but as a president of the Players' Council and being involved. But at the same time, I think you got to take your hat off to Novak, because at least he tried to do something. You could easily hide and do nothing. And of course, a lot of players are doing that, and that seems to be the proper way to go about it. But at the same time, he has a reason to go out and risk it in many ways, because he is helping a huge part of the population in terms of giving them tennis rackets and a decent upbringing and having sports involved in their kids' life. So I think, again, it's one of these, it's give and take. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. I give him a credit for trying. And I think now he must probably think about it twice before he does something like that the next time, which is obviously very unfortunate.
And how do you think this is going to affect? Sorry, how do you think this is going to affect the U.S. Open, Mats? Will what happened over there scare some players from coming up? What's your sense of how many top players will come to the Open?
Well, I think the U.S. Open is basically, first of all, we should rename it the U.S. Closed, because I don't think it's open when you can't bring your whole team and you can't prepare the way that you normally do. Obviously, some players from certain countries haven't been able to practice at all. And then you have other situations where they haven't been able to practice the whole time, depending on their facilities and whatnot in that country. So I think they need to run the U.S. Open. I understand the TV contracts, but at the end, should it count as a major if you win it? Yeah, well, John Cordes' win in 1973 at Wimbledon counts as a major. No one remembers that it was boycotted by most players because of a situation with great Yugoslavia, Niki Pilic. So I don't know. I mean, I think we've been very fortunate, Steve, to have the players that we've had, and their careers are so long. And this suddenly goes back to, well, everybody is not healthy. Everybody doesn't want to play. I mean, I even remember when there were times when certain Americans didn't want to play Wimbledon because they wouldn't allow them to wear jeans shorts, and some players wouldn't come to the French Open. So I think that it's a tournament that is very important for the USTA. And I think that's where it stops with me. They need the money to support the programs they have in place to popularize this sport in America again. And I hope and wish them good luck. I think it's great. You got to start somewhere.
Listen, and what do you think about Kyrgios' comments? Because I mean, he started to become, you know, a sort of evangelist preacher. I mean,
I think hasn't Nick Kyrgios been preaching a certain lifestyle and mindset at all times, trying to make sure that he has fun doing what he does. If my kids end up doing something that they enjoy and have fun at, I really don't care if that to me is how you measure success. In Nick Kyrgios, I guess you measure success in him having fun, feeling like he has a voice. He's obviously a very, again, intelligent, free spirit that doesn't necessarily feel that trying to win tennis matches at all times is very high on his list. And when he does, he is a great player. So I love it. I think it's great that these players through social media feel like they have a voice. They're voicing their opinion. They go against the best players in the world at times, which obviously Nick Kyrgios likes to do in many ways. So I think it's commendable. I think you're seeing a side to professional tennis players that is I don't know, somehow again they're kind of leading the way. They're having an interest in the sport, in the health of the world. And I think there are other professional sports where you don't hear anything from the players. They're just, you know, whatever you want me to do, I'll do it. Tennis is not like that. It never has been. And I think we have rebels. And Nick obviously is a rebel.
While Nadal and Federer didn't make any comment on all what is happening, Federer disappeared. He decided to go under surgery, and but I think it was clever of him because he disappeared. Nobody knows what you know, if he escaped the situation, so he had not to face anything. Nadal hasn't made any comment. Andy Murray made some comments about Djokovic, let's say, behavior or decision. And what I'd like to know also is if you think that that Djokovic should resign as a president of the ATP Tour or not.
Because you mean because of the situation that he put himself in?
Yeah.
I think that
I don't agree, but some players would like to.
You know, Ribaldo, I was the vice president of the ATP in 1988 and 1989, and we famously broke away from the Grand Prix circuit in those days and formed the ATP Tour. I remember doing a press conference at the US Open in 1988, and there was no top players there. There was Tim Mayotte, obviously top 10 American player at the time. There was me. I remember the other top players saying that, well, we're not going to support the ATP Tour because maybe somebody else like Lamar Hunt will open up the WCT again. So I think that it's commendable, again, that Novak is interested, that he's willing to be criticized, because that position is going to be criticized no matter what. And I like that Roger and Rafa jumped on board and became part of the Players' Council. I'm not sure that they still are. I think they are. But again, they're interested and they have a voice. So should he resign? Not if he doesn't want to. And if there's a majority of votes that he should, then yes. But I haven't heard that. And I think that with players coming from that part of the world, a lot of players from the Balkan countries and former, well, it's East Europe, but that part of the world, I think that we need somebody there that can that has a voice. And I think he is in a way more normal, the situation he comes from, than a Roger Federer, who's a genius on the court and very mellow, and Rafa Nadal clearly has a different mindset and I mean, the three of them are just unbelievable. I don't think you want the three of them to fight. I think that we like them to agree, but at the same time voice their opinions. And I just can't imagine having the three greatest players of all time sitting in the same room, because that did not happen in 1988 with Ivan Lendl, John McEnroe, Jimmy Connors, Boris Becker. Those guys were not around. So I like that they're trying to be heard and listening to the other players.
Steve, go ahead.
Okay, thanks, Ubali. Max, speaking of 1988, I know we're talking a lot about the present, but that was really obviously the greatest year of your career. Three of the four majors you won. You finally made it to number one after spending the previous 5 years always at 3 or 4 in the world. And the only one you didn't get was Wimbledon, where Machir beat you. So why do you think it all came together so well for you? The year before, you lost to Ivan in the French and U.S. Open finals, but everything in '88, from the time you beat Cash in the Australian final, seemed to turn to gold for you. Why?
I think I don't really look at it, Steve, as a year. I look at it as a period in my career. I mean, this might sound soft and overly romantic, but I met my wife in New York in '85. We made our relationship very much stronger in 1986, which was maybe the worst year on tour for me. And then in 1987, we got married. And in '87, I had a great year. I made the finals of the French, finals of the US Open, finals of the Masters, of course, lost to Ivan Lendl 3 times. And then the year after, I won 3 of them. So I started working extremely hard in 1987 off the court, together with Matt Doyle, who was the president of the ATP at the time. And we actually met in the bar of the hotel at Kings Island Inn. And we usually had a beer or 2 before our ATP meetings in those days. And he looked at me once and he said, listen, I think you could be the best player in the world. If you get a little stronger, your forehand's not a big weapon, but you don't make mistakes, and your serve is not a big weapon, but blah, blah, on and on and on. And I got a little bit better, a little bit stronger. I was lucky to beat Pat Cash in Australia in 8-6 in the 5th set. Very lucky. And suddenly things just started rolling. So I don't know. I could have maybe won a little bit more. I think that year stands out because after that, I only won 1 more tournament on the Pro Tour.
Right.
Which was at a Club Med in Brazil, where I was the last man standing, if you know what I mean. So I'm not sure. My dad got sick in '89 and died in '90. My career sort of ended emotionally, maybe after I became world number 1. But confidence-wise and motivation-wise, it took about a year. And then I went on to other things in my mind. Trust me, I was trying. But it's not that easy. It's very fragile. And it brings me back. I got to tell you, that's what I think is the most dangerous part of playing the US Open, not being prepared. You can go there and lose if you're a Rafa Nadal in 4th round quarterfinals to a guy you shouldn't lose to. And then you lose a little bit of confidence. These guys are not they're humans. And we've seen it with Roger, a little bit of confidence loss, and you could suddenly start losing to Sergei Stakhovsky at Wimbledon. And that can happen to them as well. One day they'll wake up and they just won't have that motivation. So I think they need to do what they want to do, and I should have reorganized my career once I got to number 1 and realized that you got to keep improving, not just maintaining. But we weren't as professional in those days, Steve. None of us were. John McEnroe wasn't either. We all won our last major when we were 24 years old, or 25, John.
But Matt, do you think that there was a physical toll? I mean, you played about 550 matches over those 7 years. It was year in, year out, 90 matches, 80 matches, and you worked hard. Was that a factor as well as the personal ordeal and the sadness with what happened with your father?
Yeah, it was. I think a little bit, but at the same time, I think that, again, I do not think that I would have won the US Open in 1988 serving and volleying a fair amount. I would not have won that match if I didn't serve and volley at Wimbledon on both first serve and second serve. And of course, there it didn't work. And then he worked at the US Open. So I don't think you can say it that way. I think what I suffered is the same as what Andy Murray is going to suffer, which is I had to play every single player, and I had to beat in with tactics, with stamina, with high percentage tennis. So I could never go out there and wipe somebody off the court like a Roger Federer can, or like a Pete Sampras did. I always had to work for it. And eventually the mind says, you know what, today I'm not really feeling like getting dirty. And then you start losing, and then there comes that big drop, and no one is there to I think everybody's going, whoop, there he goes. There goes Mats. Thank God we don't have to worry about him anymore.
Listen, I thought that you really were one of the most, I'm not saying now because I'm interviewing you, but one of the cleverest player I've seen in the game, because I was there when you beat Villas in '82 in the final at French Open, when you were not missing one ball and you were capable to lob 10,000 times and lift and do everything possible. Then I saw you winning against Lando in '88, coming to the net 131 times, doing 61 serve and volley, winning 77 points at the net. So, well, a completely different player. Someone who was using a different strategy, different tactic. What is your reaction when you feel a player who says, oh, I play my game, and you ask the player, what about your opponent? I say, I don't care. What is important is my game. What is your opinion about it?
I think that my strength as a tennis player, I think, Ubaldo, was that I was able to figure out, so you said I won 77 points out of 131. So that's a little bit more than 50%. And I think that I was able to, in my brain, calculate that if I play like I've played now for 5 points, I'm going to be winning 52, 53% of the points. Against Ivan, early in the match, I decided to hit a few slice backhands because I was sick of losing to him the same way I had. So I was going to do something different. And I realized early that, oh, if I feel like I'm winning more than 50% of the points, and then I came in. So I don't know. I was always able to volley. I was always able to hit slice backhands. I won Wimbledon in doubles, which is a big surprise to lots of people with my good friend Joachim Nyström. But we made the finals of the US Open. I made the finals of the Masters, a couple of semis at the French. So I knew how to do that. I just wasn't, let's see. I didn't have to do it in matches. I was winning enough, and I was winning majors by playing my way. And then it just got to the point where I don't like the way I feel losing to Ivan on a hard court. So I want to feel differently. I think that's what Roger Federer has done in his game. Is I don't think that he necessarily mind losing that much to Nadal and Djokovic. I just think he feels like he wants to be in control of the match, and that's why he's going for so much more these days and playing it much faster, especially on the backhand. And with that comes that the other guys are playing worse against Roger. So I think it's coincidence. The skill was there. I was never going to get tired, at least not show it to Ivan. But I have to say, that was the most fun match I've ever played, most interesting match, because I think it's kind of like a musician that still hasn't written the song, but he plays and the chords and the notes just keep coming, and then that's the song he becomes famous for. I had no idea what the situation or the outcome was going to be or look like after that match.
Well, Mats, he was in that incredible stretch there, making 8 straight U.S. Open finals.
Yeah.
What I wanted to know from you about Ivan, I mean, you're 7-15 lifetime against him, but you beat him in 3 out of 5 Grand Slam finals, came out almost even in 9 meetings at the majors. So you did particularly well against him when it really counted. And I've heard him sort of poke a little fun at you for that. But I mean, why do you think you rose to the occasion so many times against him in the very biggest matches you played against him?
I found that Ivan was very interesting to play against if the surface wasn't too sterile, which it would indoors would be. I felt that any element would hurt him, wind, sun, and I felt if I was just in the match physically in terms of power, I found him very interesting to play against. I think, I mean, I know he's told me that he had nightmares before he had to play me. That doesn't mean he didn't think he's going to beat me, but he knew it was going to be very long. And I think I felt that against him. So he was a guy that I could relate to in terms of talent. I could relate to in terms of stamina and patience. And then we had some guys on tour like a John McEnroe that when he was at his best, I don't know how he thought about tennis. John is a genius that's beyond me and Ivan. It doesn't mean that I think John is a better player than Ivan Lendl was. I think they're very even. He wasn't a natural freak, Ivan. He was human, and I knew that there was some weaknesses mentally because I beat him early in our career. I beat him the first 2 or 3 times, and I felt him giving up. And so I don't know. We're good friends now. We joke about it all the time. In fact, we were good friends at the time too. He even said, Matt, do you know if a Czech and a Swedish player gets to the final of the US Open, who wins? And I said, I don't know. Who cares? So I think we play matches when no one's watching, except we don't really need a crowd. Ivan and I needed him to watch me and me watch him, and then we'll battle it out. We had an interesting time doing it.
Mats, in terms of your ability to adapt, though, and Ubaldo cited it very well, you really were a masterful strategist and very flexible, and you changed your game in many ways, as evidenced by the '88 final against Ivan, U.S. Open. Did Bjorn influence you in any way? He changed a lot from the Roland Garros to Wimbledon. That's how he's managed to win those 5 in a row at Wimbledon. But how impressed were you with that, and did that leave some kind of an impression on you, what Bjorn was able to do in adapting his game to the different surfaces?
Yeah, I think we all realized that at Wimbledon, it's enough to hit his little slice backhand down the middle of the court and come in, because it was tough to pass on the grass courts those days with smaller rackets. At the US Open, he tried to play a little bit like that sometimes, and then we realized that, well, the slice backhand is not good enough on a hard court because of the bounce. But I think, so in a way, yes, a little bit. I think we all realized that we need to learn how to be all-round. Not saying that Bjorn looked like he was an all-round tennis player, but in terms of what he was able to do, he was pretty complete. It didn't look as pretty when he got to the net or hit a slice backhand, but it was effective. But I think the most important thing Bjorn did for us is that we watched every single final that he played in Grand Slams, every single semifinals. And of course, most of them he played Guillermo Vilas or Jimmy Connors, John McEnroe a couple of times. I knew how I needed to play against those guys because I've seen Borg play them and beat them. And when you have it mapped out, the tactics, now it's a matter of, can I do what Borg did? And I felt like I had a chance to do some of it. I wasn't as quick as Bjorn, obviously, but didn't hit the ball as hard as him, didn't serve as hard, but there was still some kind of a map that we could try and follow. So that's where he was just a huge influence in all Swedish players in the 80s confidence.
You were better on the back with the backhand down the line than Bjorn. He was quicker. He was, as you say, the stronger, maybe better serve at the beginning, but your down the line backhand was very effective, especially with all those players who were trying to go on their left and play the aggressive forehand from one corner. So the backhand was decisive. I think when I beat many players, that was the real strength of yours. I mean,
it was big. Yeah, there was a big difference for sure. I thank whoever gives us the natural talent that we have, and I thank those forces in the world because I think I was playing a game that I had to work really hard. I think that I often was exploited as oh, he's not that good because he doesn't have the power. But I think what comes with that by the top players is there comes a lot of mutual respect. And I think that top players in my time and players that watch me play, I think they have a lot of respect for what I was trying to do on a tennis court with not that many weapons. And I think some of the lucky situations I've been in terms of behavior, French Open in 1982 against Jose Luis Clerc, I think that I am good friends with pretty much every top player from my time. And I think that has to do with being a decent human being off the court. But I think a lot of our relationships are based on how we thought of the other player while we are in the middle of a great match. I met John McEnroe the first time on a tennis court in Davis Cup in 1982, and I've seen him misbehave many, many, many times before I played him, and he was misbehaving horribly. Arthur Ashe was the captain, but he never threw the towel in. He never stopped trying, and he was trying to not break the rules, but certainly stretch the rules as much as possible. And he fought and fought, and he beat me in the end. And my respect goes out to him as a competitor and as a player that, funny enough, cares more about the game than his own tennis, which is why he's still around today.
It was,
Max, that was an amazing.
It was only 6 hours, Steve. I just want to mention your book because you give me a chance to show, because this book with the greatest tennis matches of the 20th century is a book that Steve Flink has written, and one of those matches is exactly those 6 hours and 22 matches with John McEnroe versus Mats Wilander. So, you know, I'm doing a spot for Steve, because every book he sells, he pays me an ice cream.
No, it's a percentage now, Mats. I've got to give him 30%. No, but seriously, that match, what was remarkable, and Ubaldo knows this too, is that, you know, you'd won your French Open, you'd made your big splash, and now this is right after Wimbledon, where John had lost to Jimmy Connors. Yeah. He's got you 2 sets to love, 4-1 in the third. And you did a remarkable job to win the marathon third set and take it all the way down to the wire in the fifth. And that was on an indoor carpet. Was that really reassuring to you, that young, that you could play McEnroe that tight on an indoor carpet in front of an American crowd and nearly beat him in a critical Davis Cup encounter like that?
100%, Steve. I mean, just to be really, really honest, the 2 weeks of the French Open in 1982, 3 weeks on grass, a couple of weeks of practicing. I won a couple of rounds at Wimbledon. I was put on the center court to play Heinz Guntart, which was a tough first round draw. And I lost to Brian Teacher. So I realized, oh, I can play on grass too, pretty decent. And then we go to St. Louis, and I beat Elliot Telcher the first day on an indoor carpet. That was a big win for me. He was top 10. And then I played John that close. So, and again, I knew I could play on faster courts pretty decently, but I didn't realize he was close to being good enough against the best fast court players in the world. So yeah, very reassuring. 17 years old still, and obviously a confidence that was so strong that I cut my hair right after the match in the locker room. And I was pretty hot, if you know what I mean, in the Sweden with the teenage girls, because I had long hair and no headband, and I cut it all off, and I looked like your typical NHL ice hockey player with long hair in the back, short hair, because I didn't really care what people thought or what I looked like or anything. So the confidence, more than anything, was just through the roof, and that just fueled my confidence.
You mentioned before, okay, some players who like Lendl, that in a way you were some sort of confident, no, before playing him, because you know his weakness. When I went to look a little bit after all your head-to-head, of course I do remember that there was one player, Miroslav Mečír, that you didn't like to play against, and there was another player, Jimmy Connors, that you beat him, I think, 5 times out of 5.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's right. That's right, Ubaldo.
yeah,
5-0 against Jimmy.
yeah,
Remarkable.
how can, that's remarkable. How can you, because, I mean, if you look from outside, you're not a tennis expert, you would say, well, both Connors and Messier were playing backside or from the back of the court. Of course, Messier was changing a lot of the rhythm, the pace. Connors had problems with the forehand, but so it's quite different, you know, the attitude and the results that you have with one or with the other.
Yeah, I really think I've thought about it a lot because I get the question all the time about Miroslav Mečír. You know, I think this is where I can kind of relate to Rafael Nadal. Rafael Nadal is very humble. We know that. Sometimes he's maybe, we think, too humble when he goes to the French Open and says he's not the favorite. I think that I was very humble with my own limitations on a tennis court. But being humble and understanding my own limitations means you have to really understand and try to read your opponent. And I think at times I read my opponent so deeply that I was convinced that Miroslav Mečír had natural talents that didn't compare to anyone except maybe John McEnroe. And when you get stuck against a player like that, when you don't have any weapons, like I didn't against certain styles, I was just amazed at Miro. Like, oh my God, this guy's unbelievable. And I nearly felt like completely giving up because I felt nearly embarrassed to be ranked ahead of him when he is that much better than me in natural talent, flexibility, forehand, backhand, obviously strength in the legs. The only thing he didn't have was a serve. But I think that it was why I won as much as I did, my ability to read my opponent. And it was, once I started sliding down the ranking, it was my biggest weakness, is being too humble, even though I had won 7 Grand Slams, and thinking that, oh man, I can lose to anyone here. I'm happy that's the way I was, because I think today I don't know, I think I'm the same person outside the court that I was on the court, which, I mean, I have prosciutto with you, Ubaldo. I don't know if every Grand Slam champion does that. So I think it was my demise at the same time, but I was just very impressed with Miroslav Mečír's talent. And Jimmy Connors, back to that. Bjorn beat Jimmy all the time. I watched Bjorn beat Jimmy all the time. How did he do it? Well, let me try. And it worked.
I understand. Can I just, since before you mentioned the fantastic gesture you had, the fair play moment with Jose Luis Clerc in Roland Garros, because I was there too, and I remember vividly, you know, I mean, match point, Jack Dorfman is the umpire, the chair umpire. He almost doesn't want you to repeat the match point because he said it's your point, and people was already clapping you as the runner-up at the French Open, and instead you say, I don't want to win like that. I prefer to replay the point, which was for a guy who 17 years and 10 months, almost unbelievable, because you could have lost the match afterwards.
Yeah, yeah.
And that Yannick Noah says today is probably the best moment, the best thing that I have ever seen happening on a tennis court. I think it has been said to you 10,000 times.
Yeah, I think it's the best moment and my most proud moment on a tennis court, and maybe the moment that has labeled me as a tennis player, which I'm very happy about, because I think it shows some humility and honesty and generosity. I've made plenty of mistakes in on the tennis court and in private life that I think you have to come back from them. And at that time, I was the right person in the right place at the right time. And I think it was more luck than anything. Sometimes I wish I didn't, because so many times players have looked to yes, I know the umpire said the ball was out, Mats, but Mats, really, did you think it was out or was it good? Because it felt good from my side. And then I was like, oh my goodness, guys, yeah, don't ask me that now. So, but I will always wish that I did that. So again, it's one of those things that I think has made me approachable for being in my sort of level of a professional tennis player. I think that people realize that I'm in it for the game, Ubaldo. I'm not in it for me. I'm in it for the game, and I was early on, and I still am.
But Mats, a lot of people might do something magnanimous as you did that day, and then they get older and they change their ways. But somehow you never did change.
I didn't. You know, yeah, it was actually really interesting because after that match, I went into the locker room and my two older brothers had just driven their car from Sweden down to watch the semis. My dad had flown down. A Swedish newspaper sponsored him for a ticket because, of course, I wasn't making any money, and they refused to use any of my money. My family, they do to this point. They never wanted to do that. So they came in the locker room after the match and they said, "What are you doing? This is not the juniors. We have driven all the way from Sweden to see you give that match away." And I'm like, whoa, sorry. I don't want to. So they were like, this is the men. You think they would have done that to you? So I think the two older brothers have always put me in my place. I remember the youngest of the Swedes that broke through with Anders Jerry, Joachim Nyström, Hans Simonsen, Jan Gunnarsson. The next younger player than me was Stefan Edberg. And then he had to do all the dirty work. But even after I won the French Open and Davis Cup for a few years, I was the one getting the cards. I was the one getting the coffee. I was the one buying the beer once I turned 18. And they would just, go ahead, Mats, you go do that because you're the youngest. So I think I had a good foundation for keeping my feet grounded.
Well, Stefan was a lot like you, though, Mats. I mean, he was a great sportsman.
Stefan is an unbelievably generous and decent human being, and an amazing athlete, incredibly intelligent on the court, and which has served him well off the court because he's doing really, really well in the finance world, helping people out, helping himself. Scholarships in Swedish tennis has for a long time. So yeah, I think we were all brought up in the social democratic system of Sweden, where I think we are so excited that they finally found out who actually killed Olof Palme, our most famous prime minister in 1986. But the system,
it took a while.
It took a long time, but I think the system brought me and Stefan up together with good parents, of course, but we were team players, and no, I don't like to lose to Stefan Edberg, but if I didn't win Wimbledon in 1988, please can Stefan win Wimbledon in 1988, because that means that our little state in Sweden won the Grand Slam. I have photos of me and Stefan going to represent our state in Swedish tournaments where we are sharing the same room. He would always have to take the bottom bed because I was 2 years older, and we were like 9 and 11 years old. And so I met Stefan when we were so young, and I do feel that I was a little bit of, on the tennis circuit, a little bit of a big brother early on because I was winning, and then he realized he's better than me in practice. Why am I not winning? And then he started winning. So funny enough, he beat me in his first Grand Slam final in 1985 in Australia, and he was the first player that was younger than me to beat me in Milan in 1984.
Well,
but you did well against him overall.
The first tournament that Stefan won, Milan.
Exactly.
And it's funny enough that the first tournament that Roger Federer has won is in Milan.
That was a huge tournament. Very good tournament.
I mean, just as a start, I mean, it's not too bad. Can I ask you just if your game is more similar to Djokovic? When you see, I think, compared to Federer or to Nadal, for sure you are closer to Djokovic's tennis game than the others too. when
Maybe
you
more
watch,
Murray.
yeah,
Maybe more Andy Murray.
yeah, correct. Yeah. Let's say, well, Andy Murray always changed a lot his pace. You also were capable to do that, maybe more than Djokovic. But when you see a player who has a similar style than as yours, and someone who instead is different, do you sympathize more with the one who plays like you, or doesn't make any difference?
No, I sympathize with the player that plays like me because I know he has to fight for every single point all the time. But at the same time, I also feel that we are very lucky to play like me because I know that the feeling of my opponent going into the match is that I really don't want to be on this tennis court for that long. And I think we won a lot of matches before in the locker room when you play my way. But I've coached a couple of players. I coached Marat Safin, and I feel like that was the most fun I've had on tour since I was playing myself around the locker room, in the locker room and whatnot. But I think when you're a coach, it's easier to relate to somebody who plays or played like I did. So maybe for me, I would have been a better fit if I had to coach a Leighton Hewitt or maybe a Andy Murray in terms of tactics. Marat Safin and me didn't really think about tennis in the same way while playing. We had a lot of common interests, but maybe not in tactics necessarily.
Maybe you weren't too close to Safin in the way to play, but also in life, because I mean he has maybe some kind of different goals. I mean the Safinette. I don't know if you had. Did you have many Wilanderette before you started to be an husband, a father, and everything else?
No, no, I didn't. No.
Where you? But you did like to play guitar and music also. So I mean, you were.
I like to go out. I think what we had in common is I like to go out. I like to expand my horizon when you're traveling the world. And if I lost a tennis match, I was going to go out afterwards. And I think Swedish players did. Marat liked to have fun. He liked to go out. The late great Vitas Gerulaitis, he went out and had fun, but I don't know, did it affect their tennis or my tennis? No. I think it just shown that they are Marat Safin, a human being who likes to have fun. That's it. We all have different reasons to do different things. So we got along really well and was unbelievably fun. And he's such a nice guy and obviously a great player. But again, back to the style of playing. It's easier to commentate somebody like Andy Murray for me than it is to try and claim that I understand what Roger Federer is trying to do.
Sure.
Well, but Mats, that's very modest because you're certainly a great analyst, and nobody speaks more precisely or with more depth than you do about any of the big three today. So
Sure.
You certainly have come to understand better as well. But do you also relate, to get back to Ubaldo's point? Is it easier for you to delve into Djokovic because of how he plays as a commentator?
You know, it is most probably a little bit easier to feel like you know what you're should be saying about Novak, because he does show his emotions a lot more than Rafa and Roger. And in that way, I think that he is, like you said early on, that he's more naive in the way that he that he shows his body language and how he feels. So for that reason, yes. But for another reason, I think sometimes it's tough to understand what Novak is trying to accomplish tactically, because he's so good at moving that he just neutralizes his opponent's strength because of his movement. So in that way, it's easier to talk about Roger, because it's very clear that he's trying to defend or be an aggressive. And then, of course, Rafa, I can relate to Rafa because of his intensity. I don't think that I had the same intensity as Rafa. I would never say that. I never moved like Djokovic. I would never claim that. Obviously didn't have a Federer's talent, but I had some of what all three of them have, I think. So I try to tap into the part of me that can relate to Rafa and the part of me that can relate to part of Roger's game. And I think that's where you have to go as a commentator. I have made many, many mistakes, Steve, and I've said things that I regret with the language that I have used in certain situations. But at the same time, I don't look at myself as a reporter or analyst or necessarily a commentator while I'm commentating. I'm playing a match against these guys, and I'm them or I'm against them. And I think being honest to what you're feeling means you make mistakes, and you make tactical mistakes as a player. You make tactical mistakes as a commentator. It's the way it goes. I know some people are very offended when you are a little too harsh about Roger Federer, or when you don't go after Rafa Nadal taking too much time between serves, or how Novak sometimes is shaking his head and smiling at his players' box, go after them. But no, I'm there purely because of the tactics of the game.
Matt, do they ever comment to you, those three? Do you ever hear, or any of the players, do you, in the hallways and out in the locker room, whatever, after the fact, why did you say this about me? Or do you get a lot of that because you know them all pretty well?
You know, I got, after I said that Roger Federer had lost the match to Rafa at the French Open, and I said that that Roger didn't that day show any whatever you call the things that we can't ball.
Right.
And I said Nadal seems to have a couple or three or four. And then I interviewed Roger in the US Open the same year. And I said on air, I said, listen, Roger, first of all, I'd like to apologize for using a word that I shouldn't when I tried to explain what I thought of your tactics and your match against Rafa there. And he said, well, Mats, there are some people that think in the world that I have a Nadal syndrome. I said, well, sorry, Roger, I'm one of them. And he said, well, I have overcome it. And I am not the person or the player that maybe some people think. I think, so he acknowledged the fact that I had said something. He acknowledged the fact, I think, that I disagreed with his tactics in that particular match. Is Roger the same player today that he was then? No, he's not. So I think every little injection of information and opinion from former players, from you guys, from coaches, I think the great players, they take what they agree with, they use it, and they inject into their game. And maybe he took some of that and thought about it and did the opposite of what I thought, or maybe he agreed with some of it. So again, I think it's the role of our position in tennis to say what we feel without being too worried about being politically correct. And if you love the game as much as I do, I think somebody like Roger Federer understands it's not a personal attack when somebody goes out and criticizes him. It's just somebody who thinks maybe you could have done something different in the situation. I respect these guys so much for the way that they're on the court and off the court. And I thank them all for allowing the likes of me to be allowed to be honest, because I think the people listening have a right to hear other journalists like the three of us, other former players like me, voice our opinion. That's it.
What you mean that Steve Flink is not a former player? I mean, he has been playing tennis a lot. I mean,
but whatever reason we got inducted in the Hall of Fame, whatever that reason is.
It wasn't because of how I play, Mats, I assure you. Although yeah. I did manage to play a little college tennis at a place called Stetson University in Florida. I squeezed in there for a year and played #1 for them. I was proud of that.
Yeah. Nice.
Well, okay.
Very nice.
Listen, I don't want to keep you too long because we have already taken much time. I hope you enjoy, as we do for sure. I was curious to know, because some people say that you love to make predictions, and sometimes your predictions go against what is the common view of others. I mean, like if you like to surprise the listeners, it's something that you do because you enjoy to find something different to say, or because you always believe 100% what you're saying when you make a prediction, or I'd like to know
Sure.
how it comes out.
Yeah, so there are different reasons. The first reason is that, first of all, I don't like making predictions before I know who's playing against who. Winning a tournament before is prediction, yes, but I can make a prediction about the upcoming match because of the different styles that they play at. So yes, I also make predictions because I want the viewer to go into the match thinking that there is a chance for this player to beat Rafa Nadal at Roland Garros if A, B, C happens. There is a way tactically for him to have a chance. So I think my role is to try and make the person that wants to watch the match to give the viewer hope that Rafa Nadal is going to be in trouble in this match. I think that I'm trying to stay away from predicting who's going to win. I'm hoping that I predict more often what possibilities are for the underdog to make it a good match. So I'm trying to attract people to the TV set. I would like to see, more than any match ever that I've ever thought about, I would like to see Roger Federer beat Rafael Nadal on the clay courts of Roland Garros, because I think that would be the greatest tennis match that we will ever get to watch, because of what Roger has to do on a clay court, knowing Rafa Nadal. So I will give Roger a chance. Every time they play, I will give Roger a chance to win if these things happen. And it gives viewers the belief that Roger Federer has a chance to make it a close match. I think that's my duty as a analyst for Eurosport or for any whatever I work for. And it's what I want to see. I don't want to see an easy match. If I had to bet my house, I would obviously go with the favorites usually, but I'm not betting my house. I am betting.
You're not allowed.
No, I'm not allowed, but I'm betting and hoping that we'll get a great tennis match. So I'm trying to give myself and the viewers belief that it is possible that Rafa Nadal can be pushed to a close match at Roland Garros.
Or that Rafa Nadal beats Federer at Wimbledon.
Same thing, exactly. And that's the greatest match of all time because it was unexpected.
Sure. Listen, Steve, do you have anything else to ask? Once we found out that you were #1 in Florida State College, which was the main news today. I mean, I was only #2 in Oral Roberts, Tulsa, Oklahoma. So I mean, I blush compared to the #1 of Florida State. So what else can we say about?
Well, Ubaldo, I just want to thank Mats because you have such a refreshing outlook on the game, and you do speak your mind. And I think that all those players have great respect for the intelligent way you look at the game, but your fundamental decency as a human being as well. And this has been a really enjoyable time talking with you today, Mats. Thank you.
No, pleasure. I mean, I would like to say one more thing, if you don't mind. There was a couple of years ago when Roger Federer decided to not play the French Open because he thought it'd be better for his tennis career. I write a little article in the French sports newspaper L'Equipe, and I went out and I said, I think it's wrong that Roger is not playing. I think that he's built up a situation where he has responsibilities building schools in different African countries. I know that he sold 10,000 hats during the tournament in Cincinnati, and imagine how many hats he can sell in Paris. So I think that I always speak for the best of the good of the game, because the good of the game brought us the late Arthur Ashe. And I think Arthur Ashe did more for the human race than any other tennis player in terms of equality for the different races and minorities that not only play tennis but is affected in life. Tennis brought him. He wouldn't have had a voice without tennis. And then we have Billie Jean King, who was more about equality between men and women, especially in the American university system, with, I believe it's called a Title IX. Is that correct?
Yes,
And,
correct,
and
correct.
equal pay for men and women in tennis. I mean, show me another job in the world or a profession where women and men get equal pay. There are not many. And in tennis, in certain tournaments in the Grand Slam, we are. So I think tennis in the end wins, because tennis is a platform that can bring us great human beings that can be heard through their wins on a tennis court, but they are bigger than the game, and they go on and do great things. And I think Roger Federer, he as a person is much bigger and better than he is as a tennis player, and therefore we see what he does. Novak Djokovic has shown in the last couple of months that he is bigger outside the court as a human being, and unfortunately when you do, you take risks, and in this time it came back and bit him in the butt. And we know what Rafa Nadal does with his foundation. So I'm always trying to hide behind the fact that I promote the game, not for the actual hitting the ball back and forth, but what tennis is as a platform. So if people are unhappy with what I say about certain players, I know I'm promoting the game, and I'm doing it for the game of tennis, and I know you two will appreciate that. And I think most people in the end appreciate what tennis is as a game.
Listen, good end of this interview.
Thank you,
Congratulations for what you're saying. And I hope to see you soon. I hope to see you soon next to a tennis court, because we don't know. If I had to bet, well, I am sure that I cannot come to US Open, unfortunately, because actually we cannot even go to United States from Italy. And I hope to have good chances to go to Roland Garros, so I hope to see you there. I mean,
yes.
But you may have the same problem to come from the United States to Europe. I don't know. But we have 2 months more to wait and to be patient.
Yeah.
So thanks a lot for being with us. Thanks to you. Thanks to my very old friend, Steve Flink.
And Mats, for the record, Ubaldo is a few years, I'm not going to tell you precisely what his age is, but he's older than me.
No, not true.
So he should stay indoors. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, thanks a lot, and see you soon, Mats. And bless you, be safe, you, your family, your kids, and enjoy your life.
Thank you so much to both of you guys. Steve, great to see you again. And,
same here, Mats. Keep speaking freely.
Thank you.